Hey guys, welcome back here to Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys hanging out with me a little bit and swinging by the channel. And time for some positivity today, which a lot of people think is rare here on Intuitive Angling, because you know that I'm, critical of a lot of things going on to the sport. But we're going to shift gears a little bit in today's episode. I got something you guys might like to hear, and I think a lot of it's like, we've got to sort of always reset ourselves occasionally, because like right now there's so much turmoil and chaos and upheaval going on in the country right now that you can get sucked into that. If you watch the news, you can get sucked in on how prices are exploding everywhere and this and that and all the negativity going on. Same with bass fishing, but I think that a lot of times you just sort of have to distance yourself a little bit from that, from your own mental well-being. So we're going to get into that in today's episode here. And also, guys, thank you very much out there, man. I do appreciate it. My whole family appreciates the support of the channel. Thank you guys for subscribing to Intuitive Angling. If you become a channel member, a Patreon member, if you go into those links I put in every video description and support the channel by using those links, big thank you from me and my family. We really do never take that for granted. Okay, a lot of you guys have been watching the channel, especially over the last couple weeks. I've been unusually intense on this whole forward-facing sonar thing, because it's all come to a head, and we've seen those advancements that's come out with the new technology, and how it's being dominated in the sport. So I've really been digging into that here pretty hard lately. But I think at times you can get so caught up in things you're passionate about that you overlook, the more positive, bigger things. And one of the things about when you criticize things, or when you are perceived as being negative about something, that negativity is not perceived the same by the people that are doing it. Because like in my situation, when I'm trying to, relay some type of an injustice or something going on bad in the sport, I do that because the only way that you can really make positive change in anything is you have to take action, and you have to bring it to the forefront. You can't ever make change in the positive direction if you just sweep it under the rug and stick your head in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist. So I think a lot of people, they go out of their way to have this rainbow and unicorns view of everything. And in doing so, it doesn't really service any type of positive change for the future. But given that, let's talk a little bit about some positive stuff. And the positive thing I want to talk about today is spring bass fishing. Guys, we are in the middle right now of the best time of year to fish, without a doubt. I mean, this is the best time of year. A lot of different reasons. There's a window of time in bass fishing that is not a very big window, and it usually occurs when that water temperature starts to rise into the low to mid 50s and up to the point where the water temperature gets about 70 degrees, 65 or 70 in that range. This is the best time of year to bass fish. And the reason that is there's more bass that are active and shallow than any other time of the year during this month period. It basically strings on about a month. There's periods during that month that they're actually even better, but there's some that sort of tapers off a little bit. But ultimately, from about mid-March to the first part of May is the best bass fishing anywhere that you're going to have. Now, the reason this is, like I said, there's so many different populations of bass that live in a lake. Now, you've got some fish that live their life roaming out in open water, just chasing shad schools. You got some fish that prefer to live on deeper structure. You got some fish that live in that mid-depth zone. You've got a population of fish that live shallow all year long. So bass, in essence, are sort of like people in a city. You got some people that like to live in a loft down in the middle of downtown. You got other people that like a residential suburb neighborhood, and you got some people that like to live on the outskirts of town. It's the same thing with bass. But what happens is when you get into this period that we're in right now, all of those bass that are scattered out all over the lake, they're making a move to the bank to spawn, to guard fry, to lay eggs, to build beds, to feed up for all that cycle, because ultimately a bass's life revolves around reproducing and eating. That's what they do. So you got all this huge population of fish in shallow water during this time of year. So let me talk about some of my favorite techniques that will really help you guys this time of year. In the springtime of the year, there are 3 windows, or there's actually 3 seasons within spring. You got the pre-spawn phase, and you got the spawn, and you got the post-spawn phase. Now, this isn't a clear-cut delineation of how it works, because during the springtime of the year, you always have some fish that spawn early, you got some fish that spawn late. So at any given time during the springtime of the year, you may have fish doing all 3 things. You may have a fish that moved up and started spawning before a lot of other bass thought that they should, and that fish is going to be in the post-spawn sooner. So when you're talking about that pre-spawn phase, you can target all 3 of them to a large extent, but there is a system that I use, and that system is based upon water temperature, specifically this time of year. There's 3 different type of techniques I want to talk about here that are the best. There are a lot of different ways you can catch them. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can catch them in the pre-spawn. There's a lot of different ways you can catch them when they're actually, getting ready to spawn. And there's a lot of different ways you can catch them during the early post-spawn. But some of my favorites, if I want to guide you guys through this, is I'm going to give you guys like 3 of my favorite techniques for each one of the seasons. In the pre-spawn period of the year, which we're in right now in a large degree of the country, when the water temperature is really in the low to mid 50s, maybe sometimes upper 50s, the 3 baits that I catch a ton of fish on during the pre-spawn is a jerk bait. Again, usually a little bit larger jerk bait, like a 4.5, 5 incher. I use that Megabass Edo Shiner a lot this time of year. They do like a larger jerk bait. The second one is a big spinner bait, like a 3/4 ounce spinner bait with a number 6 willow leaf blade on it or something like that. Really, really good. And the third is a full-size jig. Those are the 3 baits I really like in the pre-spawn time of the year, because that is the time of year where those fish really like bigger baits. That's why your big spinner baits, your full-size jigs, all that type of stuff is really good. And the areas that I look for during that pre-spawn period of the year are areas that have a proximity to deeper water, that are adjacent to some type of a spawning area. Now, let me give you guys a perfect example of this. I'll give you 2 scenarios with it. Man-made lake and maybe a grass lake. If you have a grass lake, let's say, for example, like Lake Gunnersville in Alabama, those pre-spawn fish, a lot of them are going to be out there on those main lake grass flats that have some proximity to like a creek channel or a river channel next to that flat, but maybe behind the flat, you've got a big flat spawning bay. You may have some docks in there, or shallow areas. That would be a perfect pre-spawn area and that type of thing. Slow rolling a big spinner bait over that grass bed is going to be really good. Grass lake's a little bit different. There's some other techniques that work there that didn't work on a man-made lake, but that'd be a typical good pre-spawn area. If you're in a man-made lake, like a typical reservoir, the best scenario I can lay for you guys out is go back into like one of the bigger creek arms on the lake, and find maybe some coves in those creek arms or little bays that look like they're good areas for the fish to spawn. Maybe they're protected a little bit, they got a hard bottom. Excuse me. It's just a real suitable spawning habitat. Bass can spawn on a wide variety of different structures, but they usually prefer a little bit flatter areas with hard bottoms that are protected. So try to find an area like that in the creek, and then come out to the main part of the creek and try to find the nearest prime structure that is somewhat closer to deep water. And normally that is like a secondary point that leads into that cove. It's a rock transition bank that is nearby that cove. It could be a channel bank or a bluff bank or something like that. Those are the areas that those bass first pull up onto. Channel banks are excellent areas. I mean, on a man-made lake during the pre-spawn, you cannot beat a channel bank. And a channel bank, if you're not familiar with it, it's any type of a bank where the creek channel swings in pretty close to the bank. It doesn't have to actually come up against the bank, but the creek channel is fairly close to this bank, which offers an ability for the fish to move vertically up and down. And that's one of the big things that you have to remember during the pre-spawn. Now, what happens, this is going to last until that water temperature gets around 60. And when I talk about the water temperature getting 60, I don't mean, sorry about the hacking and coughing, I got some allergies right now, but I don't mean the water temperature being 60 like in the back of a cove at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's an artificial fake water temperature. When the water, so let's say, for example, you launch your boat out on the main lake. when you launch your boat on the main lake, if that water temperature is 60 degrees first thing in the morning, this is when you have this is what signals a big change in the bass moving from that pre-spawn deal into the spawn. And at that time, all those fish that were in those pre-spawn staging areas, out on the grass flats, on the channel banks, on the secondary points, they begin to work their way back into the spawning areas. And they're looking for areas, they're scouting for areas that, may have beds in them. They may be building beds, they may be actually spawning, depending upon the fish, but you have a tremendous amount of fish that are moving in and out of those spawning coves. And if you have a clear water lake like we do here in the Ozarks, you can actually witness it in real time. I can go in some of these clear water coves on the lower end of Table Rock or Bull Shoals Lake, and you can see these fish swimming down the bank. I mean, you can see them swimming down the bank, scouting out areas for beds. You can see some fish building beds. You can see some fish spawning. There's a lot of stuff going on. So during this phase of the year, I don't like to target visible nesting fish. I like to let them do their thing undisturbed. But one of my favorite ways to catch them when all this activity is going on is, number one, a shaky head. Let's say, for example, I'm going down a bank and I see some beds, or I suspect there are some beds in the area. I like to get off a little bit deeper in about 5 to 10 feet of water and cast that shaky head on the outside of those areas where I think a lot of the fish are bedding. A lot of those late pre-spawners, that's where they hang out before they move up. That's a really good way to catch them. If I see a lot of cruising bass along the bank, I'll take just a wacky rig, like a wacky rig stick bait, and I'll just fan cast the bank and just work my way down the bank with the wacky rig. And then if I have a like a nasty day, like a cloudy, windy day, that little mega bass, that new 5-inch mega bass mag draft, or just a regular mag draft, can be a really good way to catch them in those type of areas during that time of year. And there's a lot of other stuff. You can catch them on Texas rigs or Ned rigs and stuff, but it's hard to beat, guys. When you think the fish, a lot of them are actually spawning, that wacky rig and that shaky head are two hard baits to beat. Now, during the post spawn, the post spawn usually takes place when you start noticing that none of the beds have fish on them anymore. You can still see the beds there, but they're empty. Maybe bluegills have taken them over or something. The water temperature starts to get into the upper 60s, around 70 degrees. This is going to be the early part. This is still spring, and it's the early part of the post spawn. Based upon the type of lake you have, those same fish are going to make that same move in reverse. They're going to start pulling out of those spawning coves. They're going to start moving back out to the secondary points or the steep channel banks, and then they're going to start dispersing throughout the lake as it warms up. Some of them are going to go out and suspend. Some of them are going to start going deeper, and there's going to be some of them that hang in those spawning coves. And the way that I like to fish it is I tend to hang around those same type of areas that those fish spawned in. And this is a really good time of year to stay in those spawning coves. You're not fishing for spawning fish, you're fishing for post spawners, and throw a floating worm. It's a really good bait. A fluke is a really good bait. And then sometimes I'll take a crankbait, like some type of a medium running crankbait, and I'll run it down parallel to those banks where those fish had been bedding at. And a lot of times they pull out there. You can catch them on a crankbait. And then another thing I do is I get out there like on those secondary points leading into those spawning coves, and I'll throw a top water. When that water temperature starts to get in the upper 60s or around 70, a walking top water like a Megabass Diamante or Spook is a deadly bait to throw during that period. Same with like some type of a wake bait, really, really good bait to throw in those areas. And then the third thing that I'll do is I'll throw a football head jig out on those secondary points. So top water on early morning or low light days on those points, and then dragging the football head jig the rest of the time. But anyway, guys, that's sort of that's a real basic. There's a lot of different stuff that can work, but that's some of my favorite ways. But on a positive note, guys, this is the time of year to fish. Man, this is everything's coming to life. The birds are singing. The trees are blooming out. There's a smell in the air. There's an energy of the air of spring. Everything's starting to get green. Bass are biting. Mushrooms are coming up. It's just a great time to be out and enjoy time being on the water. So, guys, hope you're well. Talk later.